My colleague Saba Hamidi talked to someone who flew from Hawaii to LA to watch the Odyssey for 24 hours straight on these premium screens.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugian. So were you one of those people that reserved your tickets to the Odyssey and IMAX in advance or flew across the country to see it? If you were, you're lucky because it's a huge box office hit. We're going to talk about the Odyssey coming up and the breakout weekend it had. Plus, Andy Burnham is the new UK Prime Minister, the seventh one in 10 years' time. Who is he, though? We'll hear about that, too. Up first, though, at least 3 U.S. service members were killed in the Middle East over the weekend. On Monday, the Pentagon identified 2 soldiers killed by Iranian strikes in Jordan as 25-year-old Tyler James Feehan and 19-year-old Isabella Gonzalez. Meanwhile, Iranian officials say U.S. strikes over the past 3 weeks have killed 50 people and wounded more than 500. U.S. Central Command said Sunday night that it had completed its latest round of attacks targeting Iran's military facilities. And both the U.S. and Iran have reportedly hit critical energy infrastructure in recent days. So what do the recent deaths of these U.S. service members mean for this war? And will it now escalate even further? For this, I want to bring in NBC News senior national security correspondent, Courtney Kube. Hey, Court.
Hi, Yaz.
So I mentioned the 2 U.S. soldiers who were killed in Iranian strikes in Jordan. What details do we know about these strikes?
Very little. We don't even really know exactly how many times Iran has not only fired at this base in Jordan. It's a Jordanian base, but the U.S. military has a presence there and has for some time. We don't know how many times they've tried to fire, how many have actually gotten through. All we know is there was at least one incident that occurred on Friday where these 2 individuals were killed. 4 others were injured badly enough that they had to be taken to medical care. They were then released and returned to duty. But we know that there were other individuals who were also injured in this attack. We just don't have a sense of how badly.
There was a 3rd service member as well who died on Saturday in Iraq. That happened during the controlled explosion of a downed Iranian drone. What do we know about this?
Yeah, this was a really unusual incident that, again, we're trying to get more details on. So there was this controlled detonation of this drone. Iran fired it. It didn't explode. So the Explosive Ordnance Detection, EOD technicians came in to blow it up. There was someone who was not an EOD tech and was not associated with this controlled detonation, but happened to be nearby at the time, who was killed in the explosion, and another individual was injured. It's very uncommon the way that these EOD techs tend to operate. It's methodical, it's detailed. The fact that someone who was basically on the periphery was killed and another injured is very unusual, but we still don't have exact details about how that occurred.
There's been a real lack of clarity, Court. I think you would agree with me about the strikes and how big this war is actually becoming once again. Can you walk us through what you know from your reporting, your communications with CENTCOM and the Pentagon about what targets are being hit both by the Iranians and the Americans?
So all we get from CENTCOM are sort of the categories of what the U.S. military is attacking. So we keep hearing, frankly, they're pretty much the same every single day. It's things like coastal radar sites, locations where Iran is able to launch drones and missiles. Primarily, we believe that they are around the coast, so closer to the Strait of Hormuz. This expanded a bit last week. We saw at least one case where the U.S. went after infrastructure in Iran. Again, the military said that it was directly related to attacks in the Strait of Hormuz on commercial shipping and potentially on military ships. On Saturday, it expanded when CENTCOM specifically said that they took strikes that were in direct retaliation for those deaths in Jordan. Iran says what they are targeting and what they are attacking. But the U.S. military, with the exception of acknowledging that there's an attack that has injured and killed these people, we don't know exactly how many Iranian missiles or drones have not only targeted bases where Americans are, but successfully gotten through. It's very difficult for us to get any of those details. And the military is saying that they don't want that information reported because it could potentially put U.S. troops at further risk.
It seems like we have moved away from a time in which each side was arguing the other was violating the ceasefire or the memorandum of understanding. And now it feels like it has once again become an all-out war, without the president necessarily saying that outright, right? Because that would then seem like a failure to his administration because they were on the road to negotiating an end to this war. What is your reporting telling you about where they are when it comes to going back to the negotiating table and or if they are looking to escalate this war even further?
So here's just to give you a sense of how confusing the situation is and where this war actually is. When we heard about these individuals who were killed over the weekend, I started asking the question about what was the characterization of their death? Yes, it was combat, right? Because it was an incoming Iranian projectile. But remember, the Trump administration said weeks ago that Operation Epic Fury was over. So what are they there supporting? What mission or operation are they assigned to? And I couldn't get an answer all weekend. Then this morning, the Pentagon at 6 a.m. puts out a statement saying, identifying the two individuals who were killed and identifies them as having served under Operation Inherent Resolve. That is the counter-ISIS mission that exists in the region, that the U.S. has had for years. It's an international coalition that's there primarily in Iraq and Syria to fight ISIS. And that is how the Pentagon is classifying these deaths. So just to give you, it's not even clear under what mission the men and women there are taking these actions inside Iran. That again, it's 10 days of consistent, every day, sometimes multiple waves, morning and night, of U.S. military strikes, and it's still essentially under the guise of retaliation for Iranian activity in the Strait of Hormuz, when the reality is this has been a slow creep towards a resumption of major combat operations in Iran.
On Sunday, the president spoke to reporters at JBA, Joint Base Andrews, about the death of the service members we were talking about. Here's what he said.
We feel very badly, but, those great people, those great patriots were out there fighting that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Iran has been very, very badly damaged. They've lost everything almost militarily. They've got very little left. They've got some missiles. They've got some drones. They've got some manufacturing ability, not much. We control the strait. They don't control anything.
Court, how does that compare to the reality on the ground from your reporting?
It's been inconsistent from the Trump administration for weeks now, exactly what Iran's capabilities are. What seems pretty clear is Iran's defensive capabilities are pretty degraded. So when the U.S. is taking these strikes, we aren't hearing or seeing a lot of evidence that Iran is able to intercept some of these incoming or stop them. But their offensive capability still exists. To make this even more confusing, the president's saying that these individuals who were killed were there to ensure Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon. Operation Inherent Resolve has absolutely nothing to do with that. Absolutely nothing to do with that. There is so much confusion about this military mission, and we have more than 50,000 men and women who are out there deployed, many of them at sea, many others on land, and it's not even clear what mission they are serving right now or what operation they are under. All that is clear is that Iran still has the ability to target them, and as we saw, with very deadly consequences in the last several days.
Courtney Kube, thank you.
Thanks, Yaz.
So Keir Starmer is officially out at 10 Downing Street, and now Andy Burnham is in and taking over as British Prime Minister. And there has been a lot of turnover in this job, a fact that Burnham addressed this morning.
Britain needs to show the world that we can regain our stability once again. And that is our challenge, to make politics work, to make it work better.
But why is he the guy that can make it work better? So for this, I want to bring in Alexander Smith, NBC News senior reporter based in London for us. Hey, Alex.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Let's talk about Andy Burnham, right? The seventh prime minister in a decade. Unbelievable to think about. The shortest stint, actually, for folks that don't know, was Liz Truss, a whole 49 days. How are Brits feeling today with this new prime minister now in place?
I think generally it would be fair to say they're exhausted. I mean, you've run through the last decade of churn, of this revolving door of prime ministers. We've had 7 prime ministers in just over a decade. And yeah, including Liz Truss, obviously, that everyone remembers the head of lettuce. But even for Keir Starmer, this is a remarkably short tenure. I mean, don't forget,
Yeah.
he won a huge landslide victory back in 2024, and it's ended so soon relative to the size of mandate he had. So people are very, very tired. They're jaded, they're skeptical. I guess that said, Andy Burnham is a bit different in that he has a very different personal style. He's clearly very at home in his own skin. He wears t-shirts, you know, he wears these sort of black jeans. He's a soccer fan. He likes indie music. He just is very good at talking to people and just seems like a normal person, which in 2026 isn't a given when it comes to politicians. So I think people do warm to him a bit more because of that. But I still think that the hard reality, the hard facts, Britain's economy, the stagnant wages, he clearly has the sort of style compared to a lot of his predecessors. It's just a case of whether that will actually be kind of translated into the substance of policy and convincing people, I guess, that he is changing their lives for the better.
So tell me more about Andy Burnham, because it's going to take more than just wearing jeans and being into football or European soccer, than that, right? To fix the stagnant economy, to fix the hopelessness that you just described for us. What more do we know about him and why he's the guy now?
Well, I've been spending the last few weeks reporting out and writing a feature on Andy Burnham's life, his time as mayor of Greater Manchester. He grew up in the 1970s and 80s in what he describes as a very normal, loving household in a commuter village between Liverpool and Manchester in the English Northwest. Got into the elite Cambridge University, Fitzwilliam College, where he met his now wife. He said he sort of felt like a bit of an outsider there, really, and only really found his feet after graduating and when he started working in trade journalism. And he met someone working there whose mother was at the time a Labour lawmaker and would go on to be a very important figure in Tony Blair's cabinet in the late 90s and early 2000s. This was Tessa Jowell. And he basically, through that meeting, became her parliamentary researcher and impressed lots of people, was seen as very competent. He came up through the ranks, and in 2001, he became a lawmaker. He was elected for the constituency of Lee. He went on to challenge for the Labour leadership twice. Once Labour got voted out of power in 2010, the Conservatives came into power. He went for Labour leader, 2010, didn't get it. He went for Labour leader again in 2015. Didn't get it again, and then went up to the back up to the northeast of England to become mayor of Greater Manchester. And that's where people who I interviewed really say that the real Andy Burnham kind of came out. He became so popular up there because he was seen as having a meaningful impact on people's lives up there. And outside of London, really became a voice of opposition for people outside the capital who just felt completely disenfranchised with this political elite. A real moment of that came during the pandemic when he was in the city centre and received the news live on air in a press conference that his city wasn't getting tens of millions of pounds of lockdown support that he thought he was. And his reaction to that was very genuine. He sort of puffed out his cheeks and he said,
I mean, it's brutal, to be honest, isn't it? This is no way to run the country in a national crisis. It isn't. This is not right. They should not be doing this, grinding people down.
For lots of people, that was a moment in which he became this voice of, it isn't good enough what they're serving up in London.
What's interesting to me is the way in which you describe Andy Burnham. Andy's now coming into this saying, the new prime minister is now coming into this and saying, okay, in order to steady this ship, I'm not coming on, the winds of change. In fact, I'm going to continue many of Starmer's policies. Was that surprising at all? And is that about kind of steadying what feels to be a very unsteady ship for some time?
I think he's got a difficult balancing act here because clearly he's replacing another prime minister, but someone from his own party. He's got to lead all of the lawmakers who were elected under Keir Starmer's banner in 2024. So he can't completely rubbish that record, but he's clearly got to signal that that wasn't good enough at the same time. So he's kind of got to play both sides in that sense. I think certain things he's going to have to be very clever about, certainly the economy. There's this riddle which has essentially evaded most of his predecessors over the last few years, which is how do you grow the economy? How do you grow productivity while keeping your promises, which most of them have done, not to raise taxes, and not spooking the bond markets by saying you're going to borrow lots of money like Liz Truss did. Now, he hasn't really spelled out how he's going to do that, but he has said that he's going to keep to Keir Starmer's general rules when it comes to the economy. So I think that's the biggest thing, really, is how is he going to solve the puzzle that Keir Starmer and everyone else hasn't been able to solve? Now, I guess the sort of counterpoint to that is that Keir Starmer would say, as he did today outside Downing Street, actually, I have been doing a good job. I guess the issue a lot of people have with Keir Starmer is he is just not seen as an inspiring figure and someone who has the political wherewithal to bring people along with him. So Andy Burnham will almost have to keep on that unsung work that Keir Starmer was doing, but maybe put a bit of a better face on it.
Alexander Smith, thank you for reporting on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
It was an epic weekend for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, raking in over $264 million worldwide, according to early box office numbers. The film was released by Universal Pictures, which is under NBC News' parent corporation. There's been so much demand to see this film. Some moviegoers ordered tickets over a year ahead of time. 2 a.m. showings are packed, and a person in New York tried to sell their seats for $1,000. So did The Odyssey live up to the hype? And what role do premium screens play in getting people back into the movie theaters? For this, I want to bring in NBC News managing editor for business and the economy, Mike Calia. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Yaz, how you doing?
I'm good. You heard the numbers there, right? How successful was opening weekend for The Odyssey, both in popularity, by the way, and critically as well?
Right. So let me put it in perspective. Popularity-wise, on the consumer side, this is Christopher Nolan's biggest domestic weekend since The Dark Knight Rises, which was way back in 2012. And it was a Batman movie. And it was the third Batman movie that he did. So the hype for that one was insane. Another difference here is that The Odyssey was rated R, although I would argue it could have been PG-13. But neither here nor there. Globally, it was his biggest debut ever, which is something when you consider his filmography, those 3 Batman movies, Inception, Interstellar, Oppenheimer. It could be well on its way to $1 billion worldwide. And the critics loved it too. I believe it's at something like 95% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yep.
And the audience rating is somehow even higher. So there's going to be a lot of repeat business, I'm sure, for this, because there are so many different ways to go watch it.
What's crazy, Mike, is The Odyssey. It's the first major studio movie to be completely filmed using IMAX cameras. And there's only roughly 41 or so IMAX 70 millimeter screens in the world. Explain to us the technology and also how that affects the way in which you view this movie.
Well, it's even tighter in the U.S. There are 25 of these IMAX 70 millimeter theaters or screens in the U.S. And it's tough. It makes it hard to access for certain people geographically and financially. These are expensive tickets. But there are rabid fans who will go out of their way to see these movies on these big screens. My colleague Saba Hamidi talked to someone who flew from Hawaii to LA to watch The Odyssey for 24 hours straight on these premium screens. It's a bulky technology. To shoot it in IMAX requires a big boxy camera. And to project it requires like a really big film roll that's extremely heavy and really big projectors as well. So what happens is when you see it in 70 millimeter or IMAX, you're getting the full picture that Nolan wants you to have. And one of the examples I saw was great where Agamemnon stands up and his helmet is so much higher than Matt Damon's Odysseus. And, that effect is still there somewhat on the regular screen, but you're missing like a big part of that. So you're not getting the full vision of what the director wanted. That said, it's still a good movie and you should be able to watch it in any format and it'll be good. If you want the full cinema experience, you got to see it in 70 millimeter or IMAX.
Okay, but with that being said, it's nearly impossible to get IMAX tickets. So what does that actually say about the future of the film industry? I mean, if you're the head of one of these, film studios, you're looking at this going, oh my gosh, is this how we need to make movies to get people to get back into the theaters?
Well, yes. On that, studios have been paying attention, especially since COVID. more to premium, so-called premium format movies. And that means IMAX or like Dolby Surround or some of these other kind of big premium things. IMAX is only the most famous one, but there are others out there. It does mirror a lot what's going on in the economy, this so-called K-shaped economy where people are still buying premium experiences. They're paying more money, but who's paying for it? It's not really the lower end of the economic spectrum. People who go see the Odyssey in standard formats are more likely to be people who are not in these metropolitan areas or big suburban areas where they have these kinds of screens. So it is definitely exclusionary.
So the next big IMAX release is actually going to be Dune 3. It's coming out December 18th, the same day as Avengers Doomsday.
Oh, yes.
Those tickets are already selling out as well in December. It's a huge head-to-head.
Yes. It could end up being the biggest box office weekend of all time. It could dwarf Barbenheimer, that big weekend where we saw Oppenheimer and Barbie. And the reason is, the Avengers, they're bringing everyone back. Even Robert Downey Jr. is back, but he's playing the bad guy, Dr. Doom. Those tickets just went on sale today. They released the trailer. And if you go to the AMC app, you will see that you're going to be in a queue waiting for those tickets. That said, you brought up Dune. And that's led a lot of people in the industry and a lot of fans to dub this weekend in December Dunes Day. So I'm one of these sickos who tried to buy tickets early, and
You got one or no?
I did for 70 millimeter IMAX. Lincoln Square, New York was sold out. So I was like, well, Philadelphia is kind of close. So I went to the site and I got to the IMAX site and I found tickets at the King of Prussia Mall outside of Philadelphia for a show the night it opens, Dune 3. It was the last seat available, and it was in the second row, so I will be back.
You'll have neck issues when you
I will
leave.
have the full Timothée Chalamet experience in my eyes. And it cost me $40.
Wow.
Now, I bought this ticket in April.
Come on. Just call yourself dedicated. Mike Calia, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That is going to do it for us at Here's the Scoop from NBC News. I'm Yasmin Vasugan. We'll be back tomorrow with whatever the day may bring. And if you like what you heard and you saw, press the subscribe button. We'll see you tomorrow.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.